thanks for tuning in to Turn to the Stars. My name is Andrea Klim, and I'm an astrological counselor and shamanic practitioner from the local area. And today we are going to be talking with Amy and Jay. They've returned to talk with us more about Nevermind, part 2, basically. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you.
And welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Great
Jay,
to be back.
Oh, it's very good to have you back. Jay is Isabel Hickey's first grandson.
Yes.
And Amy is Amy Shapiro, a protege and student of Isabel Hickey's.
Yes.
And we are talking about Nevermind, which is a autobiography of Isabel Hickey. And we had talked about this on another show previously, but there's just so much good information to talk about with Nevermind. And so we thought we'd do part 2. And so that's what today's show is going to be all about. And Amy and Jay are both the authors, along with Isabel, of Nevermind. And, Jay, I have to ask you this. Most people know Isabel through her books.
Yes.
But you know her in a different way. Can you tell us how you remember Isabel?
I remember Isabel as both a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and as an astrologer and teacher. Mm-hmm. For me, she always tried to talk me into doing the astrology, and I said, "You do that. I'll listen." But I was very interested in the spiritual aspect, and some of my favorite times were when we were alone in the chapel. Mm-hmm. And she taught me how to connect with my intuition and my spiritual higher self. Mm-hmm. And I remember being 4 and 5 and 6, and she'd work with me and spend the time meditating and teaching. And the chapel was awesome. In the spring, it was filled with lilacs and lilies of the valley. And I can, if I think about her in those times, I can still smell the flowers. So it was special. It was real nice.
That's really nice. Is the chapel at Harmony Hill that you're referring to?
Yes, it was at Harmony Hill in Nottingham, New Hampshire.
Her retreat home.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. She used it in the spring till late fall and spent the winters in Boston doing a lot of her teaching. And she did a lot of her writing at Harmony Hill.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Yeah, well, we saw pictures of that on the last show.
Yes. Yeah.
It looked like a very beautiful place.
Yeah, it was fun for us too.
Yeah, I can imagine being in the city and then the country.
Yes.
Yeah. And, Amy, you were a student and protege of Isabel's. And could you share with our audience some of your most cherished moments of having Isabel as your astrology teacher?
Yes, it was an evolutionary process, I would say, because when I started learning astrology, I knew really nothing about it at all. Mm-hmm. But I was so attracted to Isabel. She just had an enormous spiritual magnetism about her. And my first real exposure to her was at a meditation group, not an astrology group. So whatever she was doing, I was going to learn it. Mm-hmm. And it happened to be astrology.
Yeah.
And it was something that I felt really suited for, and I'm sure she saw that in my chart as well. And so I would go to her beginning classes where she would teach us all the basics, the planets, the signs, the aspects, the houses, the combinations. And then I would stay on for her advanced classes where we would learn how to interpret charts. And it was a kind of internship process because she would put charts on the board of someone who was there. We didn't really bother much with famous people. We just wanted to look at a real person who had, things that they could give us feedback about. And she was very encouraging of me sharing my observations. She really drew me out of myself. I was an extremely shy person and not used to talking at all in front of people.
Yeah.
You might not think of that now, but it's true. And she really kind of groomed me into being comfortable she used to say, we're like a cup. We only have so much. And if we want more, we have to empty it out. And if you just keep emptying out what you have, keep giving what you have, eventually the bottom of the cup just drops out and you become a channel.
Oh.
And that was a really nice image. I thought, okay, well, I'll just keep giving what I know and sharing what I know. And so those advanced classes were really a training ground for me to see that my observations from putting the pieces together really were accurate.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful experience. And she got into a lot of techniques. She talked about derivative houses, how, for example, if the third house is siblings and the ninth house is your in-laws, then you would take the ninth house from some other house to find the in-laws. I thought of this morning. The fifth house is your children, right?
Yeah.
So the oh gosh, I'm getting myself confused. But the ninth house would be in-laws, and if you can take the ninth house from any house and see the in-laws of someone else.
Oh,
So yes,
wow,
that's derivative
interesting.
houses. It's
Yeah.
quite fascinating. So yes, if you wanted to see your siblings' in-laws, I guess you would take the ninth house from the third and find that
Wow.
house.
Yeah.
So a lot of little techniques like this, and I would test these techniques on my family, on my friends, and I was very young. I was a sophomore, junior, senior in high school,
Yeah.
and sure enough, it proved to be enormously helpful for everybody I knew to better understand themselves.
Right.
And one of the stories I tell in the book is how I was called into my housemaster's office at Brookline High School
Yes, I love
to
that
read
story.
his chart.
Yeah.
And this was, very intimidating. And I'll never forget, it was the derivative house system Isabel had taught that helped me make a very educated guess. I looked at his chart. I saw that the ruler of his ninth house was coming up to his fourth, and I said, by any chance, are your in-laws trying to move in with you? And he just turned pale. And he said, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. That's exactly what's happening. And I thought, oh my gosh, astrology really works.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of fun memories, and she was really very thorough. She wanted
Well,
to make
it's
sure
great,
you knew.
what you're talking about, because I teach astrology Monday nights, and one lady last night who's taking 101 for the second time just to really get the real basics and foundation. She said she always sort of tutors one of the other student who happens to be her employee. Or she's her boss. And so it really helps to share the experience. These are real experiences, and to line
Right.
it up with the astrology it makes all the difference in the world in the learning.
That's right.
And it really
And just to give you another personal example, and this was very profound for me. As I said, I would practice on my family.
yeah.
And I was very happy that they could provide me with their actual birth times. And I will never forget looking at my mother's and my father's charts side by side. Now, they had been divorced since I was 2 years old, and I never really had any understanding about what went on and what caused the failure in the marriage. I looked at those charts and I knew immediately, oh my gosh, they were like this. They just really weren't meant to be together. And so it just gave a perspective that
Amazing.
you
that,
couldn't have any. I couldn't have any other way.
Yeah.
So it was very liberating.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like it was. And
Very.
And I know, from reading Nevermind, it is so filled with so much helpful advice and affirmations. And I have to ask you, Jay, what are some of your favorites?
One of the ones I still use is I clothe myself in the robe of light composed of the love, power, and wisdom of God. Not only for my own protection, but so that others can be drawn to it and be blessed by that happening. And
Oh.
it's, I have a lifetime of stories of that saving my life or protecting me from accidents or injuries and things like that. And Izzy was very good at teaching people the different things like that would help them get by and for me, I was really lucky because what she taught me still stands with me today. If I meditate, I just go quickly right up to the high self. And it took me a while in the beginning to learn the voice of the high self. But if you say your name, like I say Jay, we all hear it. If you say it with your mind, you hear it. Nobody else does. But that's the voice of the high self, the God self.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's been a lot of times where that voice has come and made a huge difference in my life and still does. I can give a quick example. As I came back from the service, was out back roading, saw a road and a house on the road that I had never seen, and as soon as I saw it, I felt like that I wanted to be there, that it was my home. So I called up the owner, and he said, he was grouchy, I've got 8 or 10 people on a list, and I'll put you on, but don't expect anything. So 12 or 13 months later, I woke up on a Saturday morning, and the voice told me to call him, my higher self. And I called him up at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and he said the person ahead of me on the list called him at 9 in the morning and said they didn't want to fix up an old house. They were too old, and they were going to pass on it.
Wow.
And so when I called, he said, if you want it, you can have it. And I said, we'll take it. I had no idea how much land was with it, how much the house was worth, the cost. And he said, we'll meet out there tomorrow, and you can look at it and see if you're still sure. The house was built in 1779, so he was nervous it was too much for us as a young couple.
Right.
And we went out that Sunday, and he said, the funniest thing happened is about 2 hours after I talked to you, the person that said they didn't want it in the morning called up and said they wanted it.
Oh.
So we've been there for over 40 years and still fixing it up. But it ended up being 130 acres of land, and we did the house of 1779 and has a lot of the original stuff.
Yeah.
So just from listening to the higher self, that happened, and it was meant to happen. I know that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, obviously you've been there a long time.
Yeah.
But that was a very valuable practice that you learned.
And sometimes I don't listen, and I learn the hard way. And sometimes it's simple.
Yeah.
It's like, I went out shopping with the truck, and I said, I'll go down to Home Depot and get some lumber.
Yeah.
And the voice said, don't go. And I took the turn to go, and the voice said, don't go. And I said, okay. So I went home. I got in the front yard, and the brakes failed.
Oh,
I
boy.
would have been on the highway if I hadn't listened to that. So.
Right. Wow. So you have a voice that really speaks up.
Yeah. When I listen.
When you listen, right. Well, I have created a really special video for today's show, which really incorporates a couple different things, and I know you haven't seen it yet, so I think you'll enjoy it. Just share some of the things in Nevermind, and there's a couple other things as well. So go ahead and play that and be right back. just a little something to share some more about Isabel Hickey. We're talking about Nevermind today, but she has published It Is All Right and A Cosmic Science, my most valued book in my library. I thought it would be nice to share just a little bit of,
That's nice. Thank
you.
Thank
more
you.
about her. And there's some interesting things in Nevermind, like Chapter 6, the epilogue, Boredom in Heaven. And Amy, could you explain what Isabel meant when she said boredom in heaven?
So, as we've mentioned, there's a lot of autobiographical material in Nevermind from Isabel, and also her journeys with the awareness techniques, which became a really also large part of her spiritual work in the last decade of her life. But she had such a whimsical side to her as well. So if you knew her, you were going to have some fun. She enjoyed wordplay and just having a good time with people. And she took that whimsical side of her nature and created her epilogue, which is called Boredom in Heaven. And so as you can imagine, it has to do with God being bored with all the angels and things just sort of being the status quo, and deciding that wouldn't it be fun to create a planet where you just never knew what was going to happen, and where the creatures on this planet could have free will. But to give us some helpers, God was going to assign 7 angels to the planets, to Earth. And so she talks about God having a dialogue with the planets through Saturn, which were the 7 ancient planets, and giving them each assignments to help us on Earth. And if I can open it up handily here, I thought it was nice to read a little bit. The first planet that God talks with is Saturn. And it says, "You are called the brightest and fairest of all the angels in my kingdom. They call you the light bringer. Are you willing to hide your light under a cloak of seeming darkness and play a game for me?" And then the dialogue continues that, Saturn says, "Yes, Lord." And so this little epilogue is very refreshing as far as a feeling of levity and joyfulness and a sense of mission as the planets being archangels in the kingdom of heaven who are here to help us. And so if you have this idea about the planets as having this mission to help us, and the epilogue gives what the mission of each planet is, it'll give you a different perspective on your chart.
Yeah.
You can start thinking about, okay, well, my Mars is in this sign, in this house. How is that meant to help me?
Right.
So there's a very serious side to it, but there's also a wonderful, playful side.
Oh, great. I remember reading that part of Nevermind and thinking, wow, this is a great sort of like perception or her way of it describing and explaining and
Exactly.
saying that they're sort of like angels, each one of these.
That's right.
And I know that in Nevermind there are some prophecies that, because Amy said to me, Andrea, Isabel was very prophetic, and many of the things that she projected in the future are now we are living with these exact experiences. Could you share some of those prophecies?
Yes, and touching on the astrological side, when she published her book on Pluto, subsequent to her original book on astrology, she called it Pluto/Minerva, The Choice is Yours. She had gotten through her own meditative intuitions that Pluto was a binary influence, that it had a darker potential and a very bright potential. And she wanted us to understand that wherever Pluto is active in your chart, you had to make a choice. Well, many, many years later, astronomers discovered that Pluto is a binary planet. No one knew this beforehand, but Isabel knew. And so that was borne out. That was a very prophetic vision she had to pass along to us about Pluto. But she also talked, and remember we're talking about in the 1970s, that the time was coming at the turn of the century when we would be more ensconced in the Aquarian age and the vibration was going to speed up. She used to say this often. She said the vibrational rate of the planet was going to accelerate.
Yeah.
And she said it would be difficult to keep up. She said not everybody would be able to keep up. And, from our perspectives back then, it just sounded interesting, but we really didn't have a context for it.
Right.
And now looking back, I think of that very often when we think of the pace of how technology and our communication systems have accelerated everything on the planet.
Everything is so fast, and we call it the quickening.
Okay.
Many people, call it, we're living in a time where everything is speeding up.
Exactly.
And that's what it sounds like she was talking about.
Yes, she used to say, you have no idea how things are going to speed up. And we said, we have no idea. But it was a message she felt was important to give us so that we would understand that this was meant to be.
Right.
We were coming to a new cycle of our own evolution as a planet and as humanity, where the vibration of the planet was meant to step up. And so we are certainly seeing that, and I don't see any signs of it abating. It's going to continue. And so things are very different from those decades ago. And the young people coming along today, they don't have that perspective of that, gentler, quieter, slower time.
It's true. It's true. And, we're getting near the last 5 minutes of the show. So one thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about, Jay, is what did Isabel say that we can do to help ourselves through this transitional time?
She talked a lot about the negative and positive aspects of life and visualizations, and not to dwell on the negative, to focus on the positive, and to visualize what you want to be, what you need to do for work, things like that. And it's difficult with the speeding up of the planet because we're seeing so much negative stuff. A lot of people leaving the planet at one time. The whole gun issue in the United States with people being murdered. And it's don't take it in as being negative. She used to say, look at the spiritual side. These people are going back to where they can start again. And pray for the people, for the planet, for the country. And visualize a better time, better place.
One of my favorite things she says is prayer is the way we talk to God. Meditation is the way we hear God. And I absolutely love that. And having Isabel's, that was my first book. And that's where my teachings began, and very different life, very, very different life, and because of her inspiration, and I know she, many people have probably got her book, and started their education there, but when something that speaks to you in this way, it's something that, when you feel that light, as you're saying, it changes your life. And positivity seems like the only way, when you have experiences, because there are so many that are difficult. However, there are so many that are bright and wonderful, too. And I love that description, the way she talked about how to help ourselves through this transitional time. And I want to say to everyone out there that Jay has come here, taken time out, and this is really important. His grandma, he was the first
very close.
Right. And so I want to say thank you for coming on Turn to the Stars. And Amy, thank you so much for coming here again. Welcome. Amy is going to be here again next week, and we have a surprise for you. She has a new book coming out. So, and you can find Nevermind on www.newagesages.com. And everyone, thank you so much for watching Turn to the Stars. Thank you for all your support, and we hope you have a great week. And until next time, take good care.